everyone. Welcome to our fireside chat with Shellye Archambeau. Hi, Shellye. Thank you for joining us here today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Preeti. This is great.
Yeah. So let me give a quick introduction of myself and of Shellye. My name is Preeti Padmanabhan, and I'm a head of product marketing at Freshworks. And I have the pleasure of hosting Shellye Archambeau, who is an American businesswoman and former CEO of MetricStream, based in Palo Alto. She is currently the board member in several companies: Verizon, Okta, Nordstrom, Roper. Her calendar is pretty full, as you can imagine. And she has held executive positions for numerous companies, including a 15-year career at IBM, where she became the first African-American woman at the company to be sent on an assignment internationally. We'll hear more about that soon. But let's get started, Shellye. You have had an illustrious career starting with IBM, grew up the ladders, then you went through the startup journey, went through several startups, and then you picked MetricStream as your cornerstone. And then now you're an author and you have board positions in several companies. Tell us a little bit about your journey. What made you navigate from a corporate job into the startup world?
Well, Preeti, and thanks again for having me. It's a thrill to be here. Even though I was in corporate America almost a little less than half of my career, even within it, I was still doing jobs that were innovative. I was either helping to stand up new organizations or turning around, divisions or groups that weren't performing well. And when you think about startups and what you're trying to do, the skills I learned were definitely transferable. So I decided that I really wanted to take those skills and be involved and lead the actual development and growing of the business, right? Creating the team, figuring out customer problems, interacting, and having a much more hands-on experience than you can have in a corporation.
Absolutely. That's a nice and big difference between a startup opportunity. Now, you brought up an interesting point about going and turning around companies. So let's take a step into what you just did at MetricStream, right? First of all, kudos to you for taking that big leap. So many women are inspired by that. Tell us why you actually took that jump into MetricStream, and what inspired you to take the CEO role there.
Well, it's interesting. You have to roll the clock back a little bit. This was 2002. And for those that weren't around, 2002 was right after the dot-com bubble burst. Think of the financial crisis, except for tech. And that's what had happened. So you suddenly have Silicon Valley literally littered with companies that are now out of business, and therefore lots of CEOs looking for new jobs. But it was also the time when I felt I was ready to go after my CEO job. And as I looked at it, I said, you know what? I'm not from the Valley. I'm not an engineer. So odds are I'm not going to get an A play because I'm not a known entity. An A play is a company that the investors believe is absolutely going to succeed. So I said, all right, to improve my odds, because I definitely want a CEO role and to compete against others, I'm going to go after a turnaround. I'm going to go after a problem child. But I wanted one with a top tier venture firm. And here I picked Kleiner Perkins and a strong venture partner. And I picked Vinod Khosla. So the company was called Zaplet. I actually was hired to be the CEO of. And boy, was it broken. So I definitely took the problem child. So why did I take it? That's why I took it. And the leap? Well, I always wanted to be a CEO. That was the goal that I had set for myself early on. And here was my opportunity. I was ready. And so I believe, let me take the skills that I've got, let's build the team, and let's figure out how to turn this company around. And the good news is we actually did it.
About how early on you took the opportunity. Tell us about when you made the decision and how did you make the decision?
You broke up a little bit. How I made the decision to do what, Preeti?
Early on to become a CEO?
The CEO. Well,
that story.
Okay, well, I am a very goal-oriented person. So I always set goals. And honestly, I set the goal of being a CEO when I was 16. It was meeting with my guidance counselor in high school when you have the obligatory conversation about what do you want to do with your life? Are you going to college or et cetera? And I said, well, I want to go to college. I want to get a job. She goes, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't know. I said, I just want to earn enough money so I can keep the thermostat at 72 degrees. And I wanted to be able to eat out and travel, right? And so it was more, here are all things that I couldn't do growing up that I want to do. And she said, well, what do you like to do? And I said, well, I love my organizations and my clubs. And I enjoyed leading them. And I was involved in everything, the American Field Service and the French Club and the National Honor Society, even Girl Scouts. I mean, you named it and I was engaged. But more than that, I tended to rise to the point where I was actually president or vice president. I was in a leadership position and I loved that. And to her credit, she said to me, well, if you like leading clubs and organizations, then you'll probably like leading in business because business is just pulling people together against a common objective to make things happen. And I said, great. Then that's my new goal. I'm going to go run a company. And when I went and looked, the people who ran companies were CEOs. So I said, great, I'm going to be a CEO. So I was that naive and that audacious.
So coming back to that, the whole ability to set that ambition, and our topic here is all about ambition as well as sustainability. And when you took the MetricStream opportunity, you talked about that being a problem child and that having a lot of challenges. Can you delve a little bit into what were some of the top 3 challenges, especially with startups logging in today? It would be great to hear how they can inspire to turn around their companies.
Absolutely. So, well, first and foremost, their value proposition was broken because they hadn't sold anything to a new customer in months. So that was one. 2, they were losing money badly. And so we had to stem the bleeding, if you will. And then 3, the team itself, because this was looked like a dying company, people were shedding the team. And so, all right, I needed to find a value proposition. I need to figure out how to finance it. And I needed to get the right team to then deliver on it, which is basically a restart. That's what you do when you start a business. And so, fine, I actually went out and first thing of all those 3, stem the bleeding, right? So cut costs, make some reductions so that you have a little bit more runway. 2, go find a value proposition. And the way I did that, Preeti, is I went out and talked to some of the smartest people that I knew. And I didn't ask them, what should I do with the company? What I asked them was, what are the big challenges that businesses are facing right now? Mm-hmm. Right? What are the trends? What are the problems? I wanted to hear problems. Because the best way to create a value proposition is to find a big, hairy problem and solve it better than anyone else. But it needed to be a problem that was a painful problem because the economy is not good. And companies aren't going to spend any time solving problems that they can live with. Apologies, I have allergies. So what I found was compliance and risk. Companies were really struggling with all of the compliance requirements that they had. And so I said, you know what? We can take the technology that Zapp had built and repurpose it for compliance and risk management. And so that's what we did. And then that meant that I needed a different company because I was now going to sell applications and Zapplet had been selling to IT departments. So I needed different developers, different salespeople, and I don't have any money. So I found another company with Vinod's help. Vinod Khosla was the partner. We put the 2 together. We crafted the new MetricStream and went out and raised money on a new value proposition. And that was the key to the beginning of the rise of the company.
Wow. So many lessons out there, starting with finding the right market, finding the right product to go sell, and then finding the right components that you can then position to the customer. Now, that actually market and the product market fit is the number one reason why companies can fail. And so you literally got that, took that problem and solved it. The number 2 issue is the team. Tell us about, like, how did you then rally the troops together? Because that's exactly what you said, right? That's the role of a CEO. When you had this new audacious goal and completely different direction, how did you manage to do that?
So here's where you have to develop a vision and create momentum and belief that the team can deliver on the vision. And it's all about, how do you inspire? It's incredibly inspiring. So it's not just, hey, we can go take the mountain. People are going to look to say, really? Why? So you have to be able to tell them why you're best positioned to do it, and then the benefit of actually doing it. And do it in a way that you bring the team along, that everybody understands how they are contributing personally to that vision. That's how you get a team behind basically a new strategy and a new approach.
Yeah, that brings a great point. Start with the why, right? And so people can actually then feel connected to that purpose, the goal, and then painting the future vision of what great, pastures you can go after. Fantastic. The two great points that you raised there. I want to take a shift now and talk to you about your new role as an author. You have this amazing book that's going to come out, Unapologetically Ambitious. Tell us about it. Why did you choose to write a book?
Well, Preeti, I've tried to be accessible my entire career. So when people reach out, I respond, whether it's LinkedIn, email, whatever, because I always wanted people to know, hey, I'm a real person, I'm down to earth, so that if I could do what I was doing and I was a real person that they could see and touch, then they could do it too. But as I took on more and more responsibility, I still was responsive, but I couldn't meet with everyone. And I wrote the book so that I could share lessons learned, strategies, and approaches that I've learned and that I've employed in my career path and life path, so that others too could achieve their aspirations. So I wrote the book to be able to share. And I didn't see anything out on the market that actually talked about it candidly. You hear a lot of people say, oh yes, I did this and this and this, and boom, right? I'm now CEO. No, I talk about the good, bad, and the ugly. I talk about the hardships and the pain. I talk about needing a psychologist. I talk about all that stuff, because this stuff is hard. Mm-hmm. And it's important to know it's hard. But just because it's hard doesn't mean you can't do it. And I share how to help yourself, how to get help, how to get support, right? How to overcome everything from imposter syndrome to bad bosses to hurdles, right, that are put in your path. Because I want people to know that the challenges they're facing, people face, and you can get over them. One of the quotes I love is that a boulder or an obstacle is nothing more than a stepping stone if you look at it right. Right? It's just how high you have to raise your leg. So I wanted people to really see what's possible, and hopefully inspire and encourage and impact them in a way that they'll be able to achieve what they want to achieve with their lives. So that's why I wrote the book. And the Unapologetically Ambitious title, which is a mouthful, Unapologetically Ambitious, absolutely a mouthful, but I believe everybody has a right to be ambitious. And I know, especially as women and even people of color, a lot of times when we're told we're ambitious, it's actually not a compliment. And that's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. We all have a right to be ambitious. And so Unapologetically Ambitious is everybody has a right to be ambitious, and you shouldn't have to apologize for it.
And I see that with our startup audience, it also makes sense for startups to think about how they can be ambitious, especially only 5% of startups succeed on the average. So how do the 95% get into that 5%? And I'm sure we can find numerous nuggets, both from a personal level and from a company level, to get inspired by your book. And I love the title.
Thank you. Yes, I definitely talk about things like MetricStream, I spent 15 years at MetricStream. So obviously MetricStream is a key part of the book and that experience. So I talk about the near-death experiences, right? Which, oh, by the way, in most startups, you go through near-death experiences. It's not straight up and to the right. It typically goes like this, right? As you're kind of working your way up and around. But my big advice for people who are starting businesses and starting companies, especially right now, is first of all, right now is a phenomenal time to start a business. Phenomenal. Because whenever you're in crisis, people are more open to new ideas. A lot of disruption happens where the seeds of the disruption are given birth during times of crisis. So if you've got ideas for how to do things differently, now's a good time to actually go after it. The other thing that tends to happen in a crisis is any trends that were underway get accelerated. So there's also opportunity to get yourself actually on a fast path if you pick the right area, do the research. Now, do I know exactly what that means and what businesses you should start? No, you have to do the homework. I'm just telling you that the environment is actually a pretty good one as it relates to starting an overall business. But just remember, whatever you decide to do, it's going to cost more than you think it is, and it's going to take longer. That is always the case.
Yes, and we have to rally the troops there too. Absolutely. And actually, I want to take a step right now to talk about the topic. When we talked about hypergrowth versus scalable startups, you actually talked about why it's important to move towards the scalable part. And in fact, when we posted the event on LinkedIn, there was a comment saying vanity SaaS versus value SaaS. So tell us a little bit about, why companies and startups need to be more focused on the value and the scalability rather than just about hypergrowth.
Yeah, it's interesting because people think, the best companies are the ones that are growing the fastest. And what I would say is that's not always the truth. Not over the long term. So what you really want to build is a sustainable company, one that as it grows, right, and as it scales, will continue to add value, will continue to meet the needs of the marketplace, right, will indeed be fortified and not fragile. If all you're focused on is hyper growth, then you may not be investing in some of the foundational elements that are required to support all that growth. And then eventually you're going to have challenges. Your relationships that you are creating with customers are precious, precious. And if all you're focused on is going to get the next customer and not actually making sure that your existing customers are well cared for, well satisfied, and getting a lot of value, you're going to run into challenges. So focus on sustainable growth. That doesn't mean it's slow growth. You can absolutely build a company that's growing quickly, but sustainable, so that you don't create a situation in which you have basically outgrown all of your infrastructure. Because companies have that, and then they end up having to step back, fix some things, and then go forward. Better to design it from the beginning.
Fantastic. I'd like to take a pause and ask the audience to start putting in your questions. This is a great opportunity to get some words of wisdom, and I can continue doing this all day. So I'd like to then take a turn towards the companies you're on the board of. With this COVID situation, tell us some of the strategies and coping mechanisms that have been deployed to still continue to grow the companies.
No, absolutely. When COVID obviously first hit and we went into shutdown and everybody, no one expected the situation that we were all facing. Initially, it was all about, okay, let's make sure that our people are safe, our customers are safe, that we've got good resiliency, right? That we understand is really kind of like, okay, just make sure we're all in control here. And once we got that stabilized, which honestly, it was just the first, several weeks, then began to focus on, okay, how does COVID and all that's happening right now, is it having any change on customer behavior, on customer needs, on market dynamics? And the reason we're asking those questions is because if it is, then we need to look at our strategy. right? Are there things that we need to change in our strategy? Are there elements of our strategy that we can actually look to accelerate? Because of the point I made earlier, that during a crisis, a lot of things accelerate. Let's take online, right? Coming into the crisis, it was actually pretty low. It was like less than 10% of total retail sales was actually online. People always thought it was higher, but that's about where it was. Well, now it's 3 or 4x that, right? If not more. So acceleration happens during times of crisis. So are there ways that companies can actually take advantage of that acceleration to actually further their strategy faster? So it's all about getting things stable and then back to the strategy. Let's make sure that we are adjusting where needed and or accelerating our strategy based on what's going on in the marketplace. And by the way, that's the same thing that startups should be doing. If you have a company that's currently in business and you are operating with COVID and the whole bit, don't just focus on stability. Make sure you're also spending time looking at, is my strategy, should it shift? Or are there things that I can actually take advantage of because of the dynamics we're currently in to actually accelerate a strategy?
Absolutely. And do you see that certain industries are adapting better to this whole strategy where they're able to be flexible and accelerate versus others?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's industries, but frankly, it's really company by company. You know, I think what's been shown is companies that were actually highly leveraging technology, highly leveraging, SaaS-based systems are ones that were more flexible when suddenly being in a physical space wasn't possible. So yes, there are industries that are being positively impacted, but frankly, I think you have to look at it company by company. And it really just goes to show something that I've always believed. I think every company is a technology company. They just don't all know it yet. Because technology is an enabler to allow you to actually deliver higher levels of value to your customers, higher levels of support and tools to your employees, right? Better experiences for the community. I mean, technology is the enabler. It should be for all companies. So learning and making sure that you're investing properly to be able to leverage all that is critical. And I think COVID has shown that.
Yeah, and now with not just COVID and with not the weather situation here in the Bay Area and the West Coast is also impacting business further, and we are learning to cope one step at a time. So I take a turn to a different issue that we are facing in the United States right now, and what we've been seeing for the last few months, the social issues, the disturbing trends of nationalism and racism. So if you don't mind, we'd love to hear your thoughts on how can people be more mindful, how can startups make sure that they are creating an inclusive culture?
Yes, well, it's interesting. I was actually just on CNBC this morning talking about diversity at the board level and what needs to be done and focus, et cetera. So it's all through the company that we need to be thinking about diversity. And frankly, startups are in the best position. And the reason they're in the best position is you can design in diversity from the start. So you're now just building your team. So as you're building your team, if you look at it through the lens of diversity, making sure that as you're recruiting people and bringing in key roles at the senior levels as well as the lower levels, it's easier to do that when you have every role to fill. Because then, frankly, you have a much broader set of people that you can target because you need everything. You need marketing, you need sales, you need legal, you need engineering, you need customer support, right? You need accounting, you need finance, you need all of it. So the best time to build in diversity is from the beginning. It's just like anything else. You get the right foundation, and then from there, it goes well. Boards, same thing. You're just now building out your boards. Most startups, have one or two, or maybe an investor, et cetera, in terms of on the board. Well, it's easier to look and add diversity when you have a lot more slots to fill. It's harder for companies when they already have everybody in place, when they already have their whole board in place. And now when they have a certain role open up, they're looking for a very specific thing. So their candidate pool is much narrower, right? So take advantage of the fact that you are just building the company and do it with a broader lens to diversity, because study after study after study after study after study has shown that diversity actually adds more value to companies. They perform better, they deliver better shareholder value. I mean, heck, Goldman Sachs has put their money on it, right? They are only taking companies public if they have diversity on their board, full stop. So we're going to see more of that kind of action because the research is very clear. So take advantage of it now. It's a whole lot easier.
Absolutely. It is indeed, a great step that you mentioned that Goldman Sachs proposed, as well as now with the board mandate from California that every company needs to have a woman board member, and now also adding more women of color, men of color. That's indeed the right direction. And in fact, the whole pipeline problem, that is also something that we can put in the past because now there are so many new people from different backgrounds who are coming in.
Oh, I agree. I don't think I know people always talk about the pipeline problem. They say, oh, we can't find them. Well, my father was a fisherman. And if you drop your hook in the same pond, you are going to catch the same fish. So you've got to look in bigger ponds or different ponds. And you know what? You'll find different fish. So same is true with regards to finding the right skill sets and capabilities that you need for any role, whether it's an executive role, a board role, what have you.
Absolutely. So we have some audience questions that have come in. How do you manage the pressure of shareholders' short-term interest to turn a profit with founders' long-term desires to create a sustainable startup?
That, I wish I had the answer, in that there is no nirvana. The best thing you can do is to create a shared vision for the future. Now, as a startup, you're not public. So it really is just getting the investors aligned with what you're trying to do. Because at the end of the day, investors want a significant return on their money, right? Well, they know that high profits and low growth, that doesn't deliver a great return. You get a return, but typically not a great return. You need to have growth. So make sure that you are building out a vision and a strategy that supports it. Get your investors engaged and on the same page. And typically, if you get everybody on the same page with the vision, it becomes a whole lot easier to come to agreement on the plans to support it.
Absolutely. And I've heard some tips on negotiation from you earlier, and how you bring out the why behind it, all the tips that you shared today, and bringing all those pieces on the future vision, putting it all together is certainly a great strategy. I have a few more questions. How do you safeguard your organization against moral licensing, greenwashing? Example, we stand for sustainability, therefore behind closed doors, we feel justified in engaging in a slew of other bad behaviors, such as toxic workplaces, etc.
Well, that's a leadership issue. And leaders need to be held accountable for the behavior that they allow to transpire within their organizations. So if you're in an organization and you feel that the talk does not match the walk, then you need to raise it and make sure that it's a conscious decision versus an oversight. Now, if you raise it and you raise it up and people aren't willing to make a change or do something differently, then you need to decide what kind of environment you want to work in, because you get to choose with your feet the environment in which you work. Now, if you raise it up and they work to fix it or they want to engage you in helping, to me, that's a good sign. That means it's something that, yes, has transpired and they just hadn't either focused on it, hadn't seen it, whatever it might be. But don't see it and not say anything. We all need to show courage and assume that what people are trying to do when they're building a company is actually to build a good company. So start from there. And then when you see behaviors, actions, whatever it is that actually goes against that, then raise it. Share it in a way that is positive. And when I say positive, meaning you don't want to be the one that says everything's broken, everything's broken, everything's broken. All right, people don't want to hear that because you're right. In a startup, there's going to be a lot of things that are broken. Eventually, you get around to fixing things, but there will be things that are broken. But you do want to be the person that says, listen, we say that we stand for X, but we're actually doing Y over here. So I think we should do this differently. Can I help fix this? Right? That's a very different approach and way to bring it up. It says, hey, listen, I'm part of this company too, and I want to be part of the solution. So raise things up, do it professionally. And then if you don't see change or you're not happy with the responses that you're getting, then you have to decide where you want to work.
Sounds good. And you bring up a great point on being able to speak up, right? And that's one of the great mantras that companies can embrace to encourage employees to speak up. I'd like to actually turn the tables on that one. You shared about how can employees go and make sure that they are heard. How can the leadership make sure that the employees feel that they can be open, they can come and communicate such important messages to the leadership?
Yeah, that's a really important question, Preeti, because, I like to say, the higher you rise in an organization, the harder you need to listen and the softer you need to speak. And the reason I say that is as you rise up, people start getting afraid to tell you what's really true. They don't want to ruffle the boss's feathers, or they don't want to, whatever it is. So they won't typically come out and say, bam, right? When you're at lower levels, they'll tell you, right? But as you rise up and you come out, they don't tell you directly. They might hint at it, they might tip. So you have to listen harder to make sure that you know what's really going on. And you have to spend time walking the halls. I say walking the halls, I mean that virtually. So making sure that you're actually checking in with people at all levels, right? That you're doing some roundtables, that you have ways in which you hear for yourself so that everything that you hear is not filtered through just your executive team. So that's one. You have to listen harder. And in that process, people will see that you actually care to hear what they have to say. So it will then reinforce people actually speaking up. If they don't see you trying to listen, then they're going to think you actually don't want to hear.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, unapologetically ambitious. You're right. That was a mouthful. That is going to hit the stores, and that's going to become a favorite book for several of us. Tell us some of your favorite books, and what are other books you recommend to your audience?
Absolutely. So one is $1 Trillion Coach. So $1 Trillion Coach was written about Bill Campbell, who happened to have been a mentor and sponsor of mine, the late Bill Campbell. And it really shares his management leadership philosophy. And so for anyone who wants to be a great leader of people, they should read $1 Trillion Coach. And if you're building a business, then you should want to be a good leader. So that's number one I would put up there. Number two is Wayne Baker's book, All You Have to Do Is Ask. That's what it's called. All You Have to Do Is Ask. Because it's surprising to me how many people actually are reticent to ask for what they need or for what they want. And it's very difficult to be successful if you aren't asking for things, whether it's for your company or for you personally. So getting comfortable with how to ask and how to do that effectively is important in your overall career and in your success building a company. Another one is Undaunted, which, hang on a minute, I think it comes out like in another 2 weeks, but it's Kara Goldin's book. Kara was the founder and CEO of Hint Water. Mm-hmm. So here's a great example of someone who had an idea for a company that everybody thought was terrible. We don't need another water company, right? Why would you bother going into space? So she had lots and lots of naysayers, but she believed in the value and in the idea. And in her book, she talks about, that whole self-reliance, self-belief, and then how she actually worked through so many hurdles and naysayers and the whole bit to truly build a powerhouse of a company in Hint Water. So if you're an entrepreneur, it's a good read to help remind you and show you, frankly, some of the tactics and techniques to use. So those would be three just off the top.
Trillion Dollar Code was my first book for this year. So I was really excited to read it. And I'm going to pick up The Undaunted as soon as it comes out too.
All
Thank you.
right. And then, of course, it goes without saying, the fourth book on the list, October 6th, is mine.
Yes.
So, Unapologetically Ambitious, take risks, break barriers, and create success on your own terms. This will really give you a blueprint for how to improve the odds to get whatever it is you want, whether it's building a company, whether it's achieving the CEO status, whether it's developing a product. I mean, it doesn't matter. Whatever you want, I try to share a lot of advice on how to make it happen.
Wonderful, Shellye. I can't wait for the book. I have one more question from the audience. It's about how do we brand our technology as well as our website, etc., as a startup to empower women, yet to be inclusive to all. Because there is one piece of gender diversity, and then there is other pieces of diversity that also needs to be considered. So how does one do that?
Well, this is a harder question. I'm going to assume that the product or service that you're offering fits everybody. And so if you want to just make sure that people know that you care about diversity and care about women, etc., then show them. Make sure it's reflected in your team. So when they go to your website, they look to see who is the leadership. If women are in leadership, people of color in leadership, they'll know, hey, that's actually important to you. They see people on your board like that, that's important to you. But I don't think if you're selling something that's broad-based, I don't think you have to brand your product specifically to any particular gender. I think it's all in how you communicate. So what pictures do you use when you're showing examples of people sitting around a table? Are they actually mixed genders, mixed race, or are you showing a whole bunch of white men around a table, etc., right? Or are you doing, so there are a lot of ways to actually show that you care about diversity in how you put out the image of your company through how you design your website, how you design your teams, etc.
That's a great point. There's oftentimes I have seen posts on Twitter where they're talking about a particular product or a demo, and if you see everybody who's on that particular demo or a session is all a certain gender or color, then you naturally think, oh, is this the right product for me, right? So to get that inclusive nature in all forms of media will help the product reach a bigger audience and create more opportunities. So that's the prudent thing to do, as you had shared rightly. Interestingly, we have another brand question. Now it's about personal brand. The question is, when should founders ideally start focusing on building a personal brand? Is it from the beginning or in later stages?
Honestly, as a founder, your brand goes neck and neck with your company. Think about the great founders, whether it's Mark Benioff, right? Or you can pick people, even Larry Ellison, people who have founded companies. Their companies and their own brand are just intertwined and it should be, because that's, if you founded it and you built it and you've been with it over time, your values should be showing up in the company, right? The company values should reflect your values. So I actually wouldn't worry about building the personal brand. I'd focus all my energy on building the brand in the company that reflects my values and making sure that that's where I'm spending the energy and the time. Because at the end of the day, whether or not that company succeeds or doesn't will indeed be a reflection of you. So put all your time on the company until you pass the baton, right? Or step out or whatever it is, and then you can focus on you. But I would put all my energy in the company.
Wonderful. And this is another question I have for you. So you actually early on knew what you wanted to do at a young age. But thinking back, say if you were to talk to your younger self, those 16-year-old self, is there anything you would say that you would like to do differently through your life?
I'll be really candid, Preeti. I'm happy with how my life has unfolded. Now, and where I am right now. Now, does that mean that I'm happy with absolutely everything that happened? No. Have I had hard times and challenges and obstacles and personal tragedies? The answer is I absolutely have. Would it be better not to have had those? The answer is yes. But I'm also a believer that everything that happens leads to the next thing that happens. And if I changed any building block along the way, I wouldn't be where I am today. I'd be somewhere else. So, and that's just the fate piece probably of me. So I don't want to change anything, even though not all of it was good. And some of it was actually pretty bad. And you'll read about some of that in the book. I still wouldn't change it, because at the end of the day, it's put me where I am, and I'm happy with my life.
I love that, Shellye. And also, it is those challenges and those ups and downs that helped us shape who we are today. So, phenomenal advice there. So, tell us advice for the budding entrepreneurs who are here with us today. Are there any last words of advice that you'd like to share with them on how they can build sustainable startups?
Yes, so here's my last piece of advice, and I hope you're listening, because this one I see so much. Don't fall in love with your product. Now, you might be sitting here saying, Shellye, what are you talking about? Well, when you have a baby, and whether you have a baby or not, you've seen other people with their babies. When people have babies, I mean, their babies are perfect. You cannot tell somebody that their baby is an ugly baby, right? You cannot, because they know their baby is perfect. And they are going to do everything in their power to meet all of the needs of the baby, to make sure they have everything, right, that's required to show, right, all that attention, everything, right? They're going to absolutely give it to their baby. Okay. Well, when you fall in love with your product, it becomes very hard to hear when people tell you, oh, there's actually a problem over here, or this isn't working, or this. You hear it, yeah, a little bit, but overall, I mean, it's still a great product, right? It's wonderful, and you're putting all your attention on how you build this. No. Don't fall in love with the product. Fall in love with your target market. Fall in love with the problem that you are trying to solve for your target market. Because when you fall in love with that target market, then you're going to be very focused on every need that they have. How do you make it better, easier? How do you ensure that even the things they don't realize they need yet, right, that you've already thought about it and provided it? You want to fall in love with the market, not with your product. And it's a mistake I see startups do all the time, because you can always defend your product. People say, oh, what about this? You say, oh, no, we thought about that, but we didn't do it because of this. What about, oh, no, because we thought about it. You can always defend it. But when you do that, you're not meeting all the needs of the market. So fall in love with your market.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Shellye. Really, really appreciate your time here today. Audience, Unapologetically Ambitious. Go ahead and do your pre-order. We'll share the book link on the chat window and also share it with you as a follow-up. But thank you so much, Shellye. Really, really excited to have you here, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. You too, Preeti. Bye-bye, everyone.